Good morning and rise and shine Franklin County on this Wednesday morning. We hope that you're having a great work week. We hope that you're having a great week at school, and we're hoping to continue that here on Rise and Shine right here on this Wednesday morning, where we're going to get right into our interview this morning, and we're going to be talking about all the great things going on in Franklin County. And one of the biggest things that's been on everybody's mind here lately has been the county budget, and we're going to get a presentation this morning from the Deputy County Administrator Chris Whitlow, who is joining us here this morning.
Good morning, Kevin. How you doing this
morning?
Doing
well. So how are you doing after this getting through yesterday?
You know, getting through yesterday, we got through yesterday, so feeling good this morning. A little tired from a long meeting yesterday, but feeling good. It's beautiful. Just glad to see the sunshine the last several days. I don't know if we credit Jamey for that, but to go 1 week without rain is really nice.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. Well, kind of looking at the agenda that you guys went through yesterday, there was surprisingly more things on the agenda than the budget.
Yes.
You're actually having to do a lot more than just work on the budget here the last couple of months.
That's right. That's right. A couple of things yesterday. The board had several recognitions, recognition month, and I'll just highlight a few of those maybe for some of the viewers this morning. March is Red Cross month, and certainly we'd like to give a shout out to the Red Cross and all the great things the Red Cross does. And of course, Census Awareness Day is in March, and believe it or not, you're going to hear some from my presentation this morning regarding the U.S. Census, which is done every 10 years. And so to bring awareness to the census, there will be the census workers around the country this coming year into next year, because next year is 2020. Hard to believe another decade has passed us by. And then the Regional Commission, which Franklin County belongs to in Roanoke, the Regional Commission, it is 50 years old. They're celebrating their 50th anniversary, and so a lot of recognitions and those type of things yesterday, Kevin. A couple other things highlighting on the consent agenda was some purchase of some firefighter protective gear. Those are the breathing apparatus, the SCBA units, if you will, for fire and EMS, and so part of the county's budget. Those things were budgeted for this year, and certainly we want to keep our first responders, both volunteer and career, safe out in the field, and appreciate all the first responders. And a shout out to them this morning. We could not do it without our volunteers and our public safety career staff. Then, of course, you may recall, and some of the viewers may recall, last November, we had a fire at the landfill. Our front load collection trucks, one of the trucks caught fire. Fortunately, our landfill manager, Barry Sink, was traveling down 220. The landfill had already closed for the day. Oh, wow. The hydraulics on the vehicles were still hot. One of the trucks caught fire. And of course, with the fleet's all parked side by side. One truck caught fire. It spread to 2 other trucks. We lost 3 trucks in that fire. Fortunately, we were able, with the county's insurance, to reclaim some of that money. And so yesterday they did an emergency purchase to replace one of those trucks. So maybe not some of the most exciting things this morning, but it's very important trash collection in the county, and it's one of those things that local governments do. So.
Absolutely, and it's a necessity.
It's a necessity, that's right. That's right.
Kind of getting into the crux of what we're going to be talking about this morning. Yes, one of the biggest necessities in our county is having a county budget, and that's something that you have been neck deep in here for the last several months, getting prepared. And yesterday, you gave a presentation of the budget for this year.
I did, Kevin, thank you very much. Dr. Mark Church, Superintendent of the Schools, was with the Board of Supervisors yesterday, and he presented the school's recommended and proposed budget from the school board. And then following Dr. Church's budget presentation, of course, I gave the presentation to the board yesterday. So I brought a little of that information here with me this morning, maybe to share with you. And
absolutely.
If you have any questions, certainly we can dig a little deeper. I don't know how much time you have this morning, but we can go as long as you want to this morning.
Perfect. And what you're going to be seeing as we kind of go through this is the presentation from yesterday.
Sure.
That's what you're going to be seeing on your screen. So kind of a visual representation of what you're talking about. So Jamey could switch over to that. We'll get right into it.
Sure. Well, it started yesterday, Kevin. I think it's very important. The viewers are here a lot for me today. Yesterday with the board, that we take a look back and kind of a look ahead in this year's budget. Looking back to, I mentioned the census earlier, looking back to the 2000s, looking back to this last decade, and looking at county finances, some of the budgetary pressures and the revenue pressures that the county really has faced since the recession some 10 years ago. This is kind of an interesting quote from a British satirist. If you do not know where you come from, then you don't know where you are. And if you don't know where you are, then you do not know where you're going. And if you don't know where you're going, you're probably going wrong. So I thought it was just an interesting quote to kind of set the stage yesterday for the budget. And with that, we'll just jump right in. I'll just toggle through the slides here. Looking back in the 2000s, and I shared this with the board yesterday, in the 2000s, and many of your viewers will certainly remember this, Franklin County in the 2010 census, between 2000 and 2010, Franklin County grew by 18.8%. We were the fastest growing locality west of Charlottesville here in the Commonwealth. Much of that growth, certainly at Smith Mountain Lake, but also in some of the census tracts to the north, a lot of commuters in and out of Roanoke and so forth, and so a lot of healthy growth. And this was very interesting. I shared this PowerPoint yesterday, and this is a snapshot of the Franklin News Post article dated February 7th, 2011, and it was highlighting that growth. And so a month later, back in 2011, this is March in 2011, the Roanoke Times published a front page article, "People are flocking to Franklin County," and that was in March of 2011, again highlighting that growth. And so we thought it was interesting to share some of these statistics with the board. That 18.8% over that 10-year period was about 1.88% per year. We added 9,000 residents to the county during that decade. That resulted in, of course, new homes, new commercial growth and investment. Growth added new jobs, but it also added new discretionary revenue to the county's budgets annually. And that averaged about 7% per year in the 2000s. A good, healthy number for the county to support its operations during the 2000s. New budget revenues sometimes would average between $2.5 to $4 million in new revenue per year. And so it was good that we took a look back at the 2000s, but then also taking a look back what's happened since really 2010, this decade. And so some of the viewers, I'll look at the next slide, in January of 2019, just a couple of months ago, on January 29th, the Roanoke Times published an article, and these are estimates for the upcoming census. Of course, these are not census numbers, but these are estimates from the Weldon Cooper Center. And in that news article, certainly it indicated that our population essentially has stalled in this decade, this past decade. And so this past decade has not been as kind to the county in terms of its growth since the recession. And so we've really kind of stalled out in terms of the growth. And what does that mean really today in terms of our budgets? And what has that meant really for the last several years? Well, we know that real estate at the lake has slowed. It's gradually climbing back. We're encouraged by that. Understand from a dock builder I spoke with last evening at a lacrosse game following last evening's meeting that he has a healthy workload ahead of him, so we're encouraged by that. But the lake, that being said, certainly the last several years some of that growth has slowed, and it's slowed around the county and some other areas as well. And we know when the recession hit, Kevin, that it was very hard on the county in terms of property values. Property values declined steeply with the recession, and certainly that's been slow to climb back. It is climbing back, but at a slower rate. That being said, new discretionary revenue is really more limited now today than it had been in the 2000s. If you do a comparison, the last several years or the last decade, rather than growing at 7%, our revenues, they've really only been growing at about 1.8% on average. And really that just means adding an additional $1 million to the budget per year on new revenue, as opposed to that $2.5 to $4 million in the 2000s. And so, Kevin, the message is, since the recession, when you factor in inflation and reduced revenues from the Commonwealth of Virginia greatly reduced their aid to localities since the recession. schools are not funded at the level that they used to be, the constitutional officers, the sheriff's departments, those types of things that really are state responsibilities, that has declined since the recession, and that has declined statewide, but it certainly has not helped our budgets. And so that's kind of what's been going on the last few years. So we wanted to take some time yesterday just to pause and really put that in perspective in terms of where the county revenues are. So,
absolutely. And when you look at those numbers, I think, especially to me, somebody the first time seeing those,
yes,
it's a little bit surprising.
It is.
First of all, how fast the county was growing,
yes,
which presented its own unique challenges,
yes,
in the early 2000s.
Yes.
But now that it's been somewhat level to a slight decrease,
right.
And when you looked at that 18% increase,
yes,
what that equal to $2.5 million to $4 million in increased revenue,
yes,
when you look at just a steady or a slight decrease equaled out to $1 million, that's a huge difference.
It is. It is. It's a large difference because expenditures continue to increase.
Sure.
The services are still required. We mentioned refuse collection, that still has to happen. Fire and EMS have to run to calls, and so those expenses in government do not go away, and they become more challenging. And I applaud the board and the county government and our school system over the last decade in terms of managing through the post-recessionary years. And as we look ahead, and you'll hear a little bit about that in the presentation here shortly, well, what are we doing about that? To try to change that and recapture some revenue, and I'll speak to that this morning. So, as I said earlier, the 2000s again added some healthy revenue to the county's budget, and of course, post-recession, the last few years, of course, that's declined, and of course, it declined to a point where there were a lot of demands on the county over the last few years. And so last year, I thought it was very important in reviewing the budget yesterday with the Board of Supervisors to go back to last year's budget and just revisit that budget, because of course there was a sizable tax rate increase last year. And it's important, I think, for the public and the citizens to understand that that budget was adopted for specific things, to target some new things last year, and to assist with budgets last year. And so before rolling out the budget this year, I thought it was just helpful to look back where we are this year in last year's budget. And of course, in that budget, the real estate, of course, rate did increase 6 cents, and from that, 2 cents was allocated to the schools, 2 cents for fire, EMS, and sheriff's department. The county added some new fire EMS career staff last year for a few of the career stations, paramedic firefighters. In addition, the sheriff's office added a few deputies and some dispatchers. About a penny and a half went to some debt service on the development of the new business park there along 220. And then about half a penny went to the landfill for the closure of the old landfill, which is, of course, mandated. Our new landfill is set to serve the county for many, many decades to come, but the old landfill that has served us and served us well, it will need to be covered and capped later this year. So, of course, that required some dollars. And then some personal property increases to help on the ongoing capital maintenance for various items. So the main point there is last year's tax rate adjustments were targeted for specific things, and not necessarily the ongoing operational needs of inflation, cost of utilities, cost of software, those type of things that normally occur in a budget. So it was important that we went back and looked at last year before we really look ahead to what we will look at this year. That being said, when we look ahead and looking at our revenues for next year, really beyond those rate adjustments last year, there's really new minimal revenue growth anticipated again next year. And so there is there's some revenue from the state and the feds, about $1 million, and while that is a lot of money, in the scheme of things, in a $143 million budget, it only goes so far, I guess, to say. And of course, the $1 million in local discretionary revenue, which is about, again, 1.5%. And that's been about that average over the last several years. A lot of that growth, Kevin, is really coming from some real estate. So real estate's still growing, again, at a much slower rate. and then some personal property growth. And an interesting one really that we're seeing is our sales tax. We've been having some very healthy sales tax growth. We think that's an indication of the healthy economy. We know unemployment is down here as well as nationally. And so not only Franklin County, but our neighboring counties and localities are also seeing that, and we're seeing that statewide. And so that's encouraging. That's encouraging news in terms of signs of the economy. So looking ahead, then at the school budget, as the budget is constructed for next year and drafted and put together, the school system, of course, has shared their needs with the board. Some major initiatives that they have highlighted is a 3.2% average move-up step pay increase for county schools. They noted some possible personnel reductions to help with their budget this coming year due to a drop in their average daily membership and the number of students at the schools. And of course, there's always other expense needs such as rising cost of health insurance and so forth with our schools. So that being said, the schools are requesting an additional approximately $4 million or $3.8 million from the county over what they received in the current year last year, and that is their request. Of course, they are dealing with an issue in the drop of student enrollment. Of course, they over-projected their enrollment this year by 88 students. Of course, what that means is per student, there is a certain amount of allocation that the Commonwealth of Virginia gives school systems. And so if you get it right, that's good. If it's a little over and you over project and there are less students when school starts in August, then there's less funds obviously for the school system to operate. And so a fairly large over projection of course is affecting their budget this current year. But then looking at next year, they're projecting to lose an additional 160 students. And so the school system had shared some information with us several weeks back, looking back to their average daily membership, those totals back to the 2000s, Kevin, whereby between 2007 and really the current year or next year rather, our school system's lost about 800 students. That's about 11% of the student population, and so that is affecting their budget in that way. Looking ahead at the county's various departments and requests, of course, there's always new requests for budgetary items, and the county departments, various departments, when they were crafting their budgets this year, requested about $3.2 million in new requests or new needs, if you will. Some new positions were requested in the Sheriff's Department, Social Services, some other areas in the county. New capital funding request for capital maintenance and infrastructure, about $4.8 million more really than what we have been funding in our capital of $2.2 million. And then we're looking at doing a fall financing this fall, which is already covered from last year's budget. It would not require new additional dollars, and really that's for the closure and the capping of the landfill, I think that I mentioned to you. Some of the budgetary pressures, some of the viewers, and they're real, they're out there. Workers' compensation insurance increases. Leachate hauling, I'll highlight that one a little bit. Last year, the county received 94 inches of rain at our county landfill, and of course we are required, all of that rainwater goes to the bottom of the landfill, and we have to collect it. It has to be treated. It has to be hauled off site and treated at a wastewater treatment facility. That comes with a cost, and a rather expensive cost. And so 94 inches of rain, double that cost. We knew we had to plan more for that this year in case there's another year like 2018. Certainly I hope not like the sunshine outside, but we still need to plan in a budget for it accordingly. And then of course there's some increases on some of our public safety pressures. And Kevin, if I could pause there and just talk a little bit about that. While the population was increasing in the 2000s, and certainly some population growth, hopefully now beginning to reoccur in the county, the cost of fire and EMS apparatus, those trucks and engines, have risen exponentially, really, since 2006. Essentially, it's doubled. In 2006, an ambulance would cost 125,000. Today they're about 250. A fire engine back in 2006 was 219,000. Today 550,000. I say that to say the county is still putting the same amount of dollars, $2.2 million, in its capital fund each year, and out of the capital fund is where we're able to purchase this equipment. And so far less dollars in our capital funding budget means less opportunity to fund these very expensive pieces of equipment, and those equipment costs continue to increase and increase really higher than inflation. You know, a fire truck, a lot of steel, and so depending on the price of steel, then also there are a lot of federal new emission standards on heavy trucks that have been implemented in the last decade that's contributing to the cost increase, as well as mandated safety requirements, certainly. And certainly we want to keep our personnel safe, but many of these new mandates are also contributing to the cost of equipment. One of the other budgetary pressures is our volunteers, and this is not necessarily a Franklin County issue. It's certainly an issue of local governments around Virginia, really around the country, and we appreciate our volunteers immensely. We could not do fire EMS without volunteers. That being said, the stringent requirements on certifications to run, to be a paramedic or a paramedic specifically, advanced life support or basic life support, requires a significant amount of training, many hours, upwards of 180 plus hours that you must complete before you can really volunteer. And so what that means is, in an economy today, unlike an economy 2 or 3 decades ago, where your work hours may have been 7 to 4 or 9 to 5. Work hours today for folks that their day jobs before they can volunteer may require them to work nights, flexible schedules, weekends. Sure. And so it's much harder today nationally, and this is something that we're seeing nationally, specifically on EMS for rescue volunteers. And we applaud those today that are sacrificing their time to continue to help run calls. That being said, there last year, and you can see from the chart here, volunteers in 2013 on the rescue side, about 82, and of course that's dropped to about 41 today. And again, we're seeing that nationally, so what that means is if a volunteer station, if there are not enough volunteers to mark up that night to run a call, then the county has to backfill that and make sure that we provide 24/7 coverage for EMS and 911. And we're working in partnerships now with some of the volunteer squads to assist them. If they cannot mark up one evening, we may be able to put a couple of folks in the station to help cover the calls there in a partnership. But that is a budget point, because that does require county dollars to pay part-time or full-time EMS to cover those calls. I may pause there, Kevin. It may be a good time to pause, because this next topic is a little more deep. It takes a little more effort in terms of explaining this next one, but our primary budgetary pressure going into FY 1920 is our Children's Services Act, or CSA. And first, it's very important that really understanding a little bit about what is the Children's Services Act. And the Children's Services Act, it was an effort and legislation that was adopted by the Virginia General Assembly in the 1990s and the mid-90s to provide a community collaborative-based approach to helping children in need of services. Children in danger of foster care, children with high specific needs. And so the Children's Services Act was created, and it was created whereby the Commonwealth of Virginia funds a portion, approximately 70% of those services, and then of course the localities fund the other 30%. And so populations, again, of children that may be in danger of foster care with emotional needs, social needs, educational needs, and so in Franklin County and statewide, the CSA, or the Children's Services Act, CSA for short, is managed by what's called a Community Policy Management Team. And of course, that management team is made up by a provider from a representative from the school system, from the local community services board, Piedmont Community Services in our case, the Department of Social Services, the court services unit, the health department, then a representative from the Board of Supervisors, a representative from private providers. And so this team, if you will, is charged with really managing this program. From that, there is a team called the Family Assessment Planning Team, and these really are your social worker case managers that are really will get a case, if you will, and they will develop a case plan for funding for services. And services may be foster care prevention, mentoring, special education, private education day placements, residential day placements, and so forth. So these are some services a lot of times that viewers and folks may not necessarily be aware of, and that's out there in terms of the requirements. Some of these services are mandated, while others really are to assist from the child standpoint of providing the most collaborative approach to really help children in need of services. Looking at this year, we recognized early on that this was going to be a significant budgetary issue for us, and I'll go through some of this information here with you and the viewers to really help try to explain this a little bit. But we've seen a 40% increase in the CSA program in the last 5 years, and it continues to grow. And again, that's concerning to us because we know our school population is declining, the county population has stalled. Why is this subpopulation growing at that level? And so we know we need to roll up our sleeves and really better understand. And so I don't necessarily have a lot of answers for you today, Kevin. I have more questions. I have shared this information with our CPMT, our Community Policy Management Team. I've shared this information with Dr. Church in the school system, Debbie Powell in our Social Services Department, and many others, and I've shared this with the board. But the bottom line is this 40% growth, it's unsustainable growth. It's absorbing county surpluses and new discretionary revenues. And so that small amount of discretionary revenue that I spoke to you earlier about, that $1 million or so and maybe extra new money, at the end of each year, if our CSA expenditures continue to increase and more children in the CSA program, that's really taken money away from other function or program areas. It takes money away from the general school budget. It takes money away from public safety and some of these other needs and so forth. So we really think it's important that we have a community collaborative discussion about this and really try to wrap our hands around controlling this cost because, again, it's growing at a significant rate. And so back in January, I asked our staff to further dive into this. And what concerned me late last summer and the fall was it appeared last year that the CSA expenditures were going to be in excess of an additional $1.3 million. That was significant last year. And what that required was on the local match, essentially 30% for the county. That's several $100,000, about $300,000+ that we had to find to fund this. And so my concern then in that, and of course our CPMT met with the board back in late summer, early fall, and really went over their ideas to try to contain or kind of slow that growth down. And wanted to kind of get a status check in January how that was going, and what I found amazed me. It appears that we're over about 6% in January from a year ago, and it was about 10% over in February from a year ago. And so we knew that was going to be a big budget issue again going in. And so we asked the staff to do some analysis with our CSA program, and as you can see, that 40% growth, essentially $2 million, and again, that's the total, but the county portion of that's 30%. That's still a significant number since 2013-14. When we look at where are the costs in that $6 million, where is most of that growth? And what we found is most of that growth, 70%, is really coming from the private day school and residential education expenditures. And private day school, what that is if children are in special education in our school system, And there comes a point where our school system can no longer provide services within the school system. There are private educational providers in the region, primarily the Roanoke region, or private schools. The county is on the hook, if you will, to provide the local share of those costs, and of course the school system also spends their portion on transportation for these students in and out of the county every day, and certainly these students, in many cases, very heart-wrenching stories in CSA. These are real needs. These are services that are highly specialized that maybe our school system and our facilities here are not necessarily equipped to assist with. And so we knew we need to look further into this because it continues to increase. So we decided, well, you know, let's look at some of the comparisons of those localities around us. And you know, if this is it unique to Franklin County? Is it something that other counties are dealing with? And of course, the analysis really brings more questions than answers. And if you can see here from the chart, Kevin, with some of these other localities, you know, Franklin County in fiscal year 18 had 355 kids in its CSA program. But when you compare that with Montgomery County, which is twice Franklin County's population, Montgomery County only had 46 children, youth, in their CSA program. Henry County, if you will, to our south, they're essentially about our population. We may be a couple of thousand more in population than Henry County, but still very much like Franklin County in terms of its population, only had 78. In Bedford County, across the lake, 187. And so when we dived deeper into this, it raised a lot of questions for us as to, you know, what may be causing some of this. And, you know, and looking further, you see the expenditures. The amount of kids certainly is equated with the amount of the expenditures on the increase. And again, in FY18, $6.2 million in Franklin County, but yet Henry County only $830,000. And so, again, a lot of questions there. When you look at the private day school and residential education cost, again, that's where a lot of this cost is being driven. The number of kids in these private day schools, much higher here in Franklin than some of the surrounding areas. And so I had an opportunity to discuss some of this with our school superintendent as well as some of the providers, really to seek more answers to some of these questions to better understand. Certainly there may be other localities where there is a local school perhaps in their school system that they're able to keep children inside the system as opposed to outsourcing, if you will, to these private school day placements. And certainly if that is an opportunity for us, I think that's certainly something that the community that we need to look into. Certainly if it can save money in other communities, significant dollars, then certainly that helps the overall school budget, not just special education and so forth, but it perhaps can help other parts of the school and county budget. So in summary, again, we know what we've seen over the last few years, and the data is there, that those are real numbers given to us from the Virginia Office of Comprehensive Services that keeps up with those data sets. But we know there's unsustainable growth there. Again, it's absorbing some surpluses and that new discretionary revenue, which has shrunk since the 2000s. And you know, that's revenue that could be used for other things each year for us. And so again, that CSA expenditure increase last year was about 1.3 million. That required an additional 364,000. Unfortunately, looking at this current fiscal year, as I mentioned, our February numbers are still trending high. That's potentially hundreds of thousands more that are going to be required next year. And so We knew we needed some immediate action steps. So we know this is a shared or collaborative approach to control some of that growth and reclaim the revenue. We made some CPMT appointments from our staff. I was appointed yesterday by the board to the CPMT as well as our finance staff, really to better understand what are some best practices. I've had a chance to talk to some consultants who had worked with neighboring Pennsylvania County who had a similar issue, really trying to better understand the cost. How can we serve children and youth and get them the services that they need, and they desperately need them. Some of these stories are heart-wrenching. But yet, how can we do it smarter? How can we do it more efficiently? That's going to be the community question, and I think that's something that as a community we'll all need to collaborate and resolve together. And so I'm recommending that we really begin a phased implementation of some of these budgetary costs of the private special education costs specifically with the Franklin County Public Schools. Some localities in Virginia, school systems bear all of that local match cost. In Franklin County, we do not. Some other school systems pay a portion of those costs. We know that over 50% of children into the CSA program are referred by our school system. Other referrals come through social services or Piedmont Community Services or the courts, but the majority overwhelmingly comes from the public school system. So we know we need to share certainly in the solution and potentially look in sharing some of these costs, because on the back end, or it will only benefit both if we can again reclaim some of that revenue. So that's kind of a look at CSA this morning. I hope that gives you a better understanding of one of the budgetary pressures that we'll be working on over the next, and it won't be a quick fix. I'm sure we did not, this growth did not happen overnight. It will continue, and it's not to say that growth is not without merit. Again, there are real needs in our community and children who need services. But again, that question, are we, when we compare with our neighbors, when the numbers are so vastly different, are we acting smart enough and efficient enough in providing those services? And we can get there. And so that's a little bit about CSA, and that's probably another good time to pause, because there's also, I know that was very heavy and kind of down in the weeds, if you will, but I'd like to also talk about going back to those revenues and recapturing some county growth and some of the positive things I think that the county's taking to recapture its economy. Pause now. I know we've been in the weeds some talking about some of the expenditures, but looking at, how do we get back to some of that revenue growth that we saw certainly in the 2000s and some of the other years. And the board and previous boards, I should say, not just the current Board of Supervisors, but previous boards, of course, have adopted various strategic plans. They've continued those and have set priorities. Some of those include economic development. And of course a priority of sites development. The county of course was very limited on the amount of available business and industrial sites, and so previous boards certainly had sought back in the first part of this decade, 2011, 12, 13, developed an economic development committee who recommended that the county really needed to search for available land and develop a park, if you will. And so the Summit View Business Park kind of risen out of that from several years ago. Another, of course, is job retention and above average salary jobs recruitment and reversing the out commute in the county. Something that the board has been working on the last few years is managed growth and looking at, again, population attraction, and would like to get back to the 1% or above growth. And so the county spent a lot of time on village planning and of course wrapped up, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the village plans around the county. Of course, infrastructure, very important. If you're going to grow a community, you have to have infrastructure, water, sewer, broadband, very important. And of course the Broadband Authority, which is the Board of Supervisors, met yesterday and approved a grant application. Of course, they're applying for some grant funds to run some additional broadband into the underserved underserved areas of the county. And so the board's diligently working at that issue. And of course, we know that is not just unique to Franklin County. That is an issue that is certainly all local governments in Virginia, specifically rural Virginia, is having to tackle. The unique thing for Franklin County with broadband is our topography. One of the great things about Franklin County is our beautiful mountains. One of the challenges to Franklin County are our beautiful mountains in terms of getting broadband and so forth, fiber and high-speed internet to homes. Of course, and that's a main, if you ask a realtor today, more likely they will be the number one thing they would tell you is, do I have broadband? Do I have fast, high-speed internet? So it's very important, and so the county's continuing to look at that because we know we need that to recapture growth. Lifelong learning. Very high priority for the Board of Supervisors and our school system, not only for students but adults, and of course the Franklin Center and the work being done at the Franklin Center, but also our students, and making sure that our students and adults have the high skills that they will need as the county recruits businesses and industries for the new Summit View Business Park. Public safety, we spent a lot of time on that this morning, Kevin. I won't continue much on that, but certainly that is very important, and the financial stability of the county is extremely important because as the county in the future, if the county needs to borrow funds to build a school or renovate a building or whatever it may be, our bond ratings are extremely important. And so fortunately for Franklin County has the highest bond rating of any other locality in the Virginia Tobacco region, which is really basically Southern Virginia. We're very proud of that. The Board of Supervisors has been proud of that. We are just one step away from the highest rating, which is AAA, but we're AA plus by Standards & Poor's, Moody, Fitch. Those are very, very high quality bond ratings, and it's been able to save the taxpayers dollars anytime the county's had to borrow funds over the last couple of decades. And so very proud of that and the financial and fiscal responsibility of the county. And of course, operational effectiveness, and we've talked some about that and the challenges, of course, that the county has and our school system has in terms of retaining high quality teachers and market pay and compensation and competing with our neighbors in the Roanoke region. So all very important things. So we wanted to take a look at how are we doing with those priorities. Kevin, kind of taking a look back, and it's important that we do that. It's important that we all hold ourselves accountable and certainly in terms of report cards. In economic development, last year the county announced approximately $37.7 million in new investment and approximately 160 new jobs by many of our corporate partners, including Stick Pack Solution Matrix in their announcement to invest in the new Summit View Business Park. Valley Star in their announcement last year to build their operations center there in the business park. Empire Foods, great corporate partner here in Franklin County, specifically within the town of Rocky Mount and the county's industrial park, announced a major expansion last year. And McAirlades, of course, are the manufacturer there, the large manufacturer in the Commerce Center, also recently announced a significant expansion. So again, I mentioned earlier, sales tax growth is up and maybe a signal of the national economy, and certainly we're thankful that these and our other corporate partners, and I know there's probably been numerous small businesses there that also have been expanding this year, and very appreciative of that, but that's something that we need to keep our focus on, and certainly as the Summit View Business Park continues to develop and we bring new sites online to spur not only new commercial industrial development, but also perhaps new homes and our population, again, to help with our challenging budgets. Managed growth. I mentioned earlier our village plans. Village plans have been completed at Union Hall and Westlake and Ferrum by our Planning Commission and our planning staff. The Westlake Village Plan that was adopted won the American Planning Association National Award last year, or the year before. And so that was significant, and from that, the county has been able to secure a federal grant to develop pedestrian bicycle trails that connects the Westlake Village to the Booker T. Washington National Monument. In addition, there is some new growth that, of course, that was approved this last year of new townhomes and apartments and so forth in the Westlake Village that will hopefully be underway this coming year. And then the county's wrapping up a village plan there with Ferrum in the village of Ferrum, and working with Ferrum College, but also the Ferrum business community, as well as possibilities to develop some residential options for the county. And of course, we found, and I noted earlier, in the 2000s, while there was growth in the county, certainly there's growth today, but today's market's different than the market in the 2000s. What we're finding nationally is, folks are looking for more diverse, maybe patio homes, maybe townhomes, not the traditional residential growth. So it has changed, and we need to make sure that we change with that and we market ourselves accordingly with that. Looking at lifelong learning, and I mentioned our school system, very proud of the Franklin County Public Schools. We cannot say that enough. That is probably the strongest strength, I think, in our economic development arsenal, if you will. When we compare ourselves into the region, our schools compare highly favorably with other school systems in the region. All of our schools are fully accredited. Boone's Mill Elementary and Burnt Chimney Elementary just won recognized by the Virginia Education Distinguished Schools Awards for those specific schools. Our partnership with the Franklin Center, which is really Franklin County's higher education center, and our partnership with Virginia Western Community College. There are students there, Kevin, today on the campus at the Franklin Center that are college students, but they're high school students. They're dual enrolled and taking college anatomy and biology, and so we're thankful for our partners at Virginia Western, Ferrum College, which also offers classes at the Franklin Center, and Mary Baldwin University and others. That's very important into the recipe or the menu that makes up a quality community. Something that I should highlight here that I think that we forget sometimes is recognizing the Community College Access Program, and that's at Virginia Western, and it's available for qualifying Franklin County residents to attend Virginia Western tuition free. And this has been financed really by a contribution from the Board of Supervisors for the last 10 years, and it will continue. The recommendation next year is to continue. The board is contributing $100,000 annually into this program, which leverages additional tax dollars from the state through Tobacco Commission grants. And so that's helped support Franklin County, but then also some of the other Roanoke region localities also support that program. And I know it's been highly desirable by many Franklin County families where their son or daughter could graduate the high school or a private or homeschool and qualify and attend Virginia Western. And then certainly Ferrum College, new leadership there at the college with Dr. Johns, and just a great partnership with Ferrum College. Very proud of that and all the great things that Ferrum is doing, and I'm very excited about the vision that Ferrum has and where they're taking that. And then certainly, and we talked on this earlier, our infrastructure, we cannot do things without the Water Authority, our partnership there, and some of these broadband providers, and the landfill rather. And then looking at strategic performance, Kevin, how are we doing on our financial stability and operational effectiveness? Well, the county's been very fortunate the last couple of decades to win the Government Finance Officers Association Certificate of Achievement, both for its budget, the annual budget, as well as our audit. Our CAFR, our Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, is the longer term, if you will. And not every community receives those. Those are highly sought after. It certainly helps contribute to the county's bond rating. I'm very proud of the county's finance staff as well as the school system and their finance staff in assisting us with that. The county continues to place in the top 10 as a digital county for our e-government services, our technology services online. And in addition to that, last year, very proud of this, our Parks and Recreation Department, just a tremendous shout out to Director Paul Chapman and others in the Parks and Recreation Department. Last year at the Virginia Recreation and Park Society conference, Franklin County took away the majority of the awards last year. So we're very proud of that. One was the family tubing at Wade Park on the Pig River, very innovative, and won that state award. In addition to that, the photography and the marketing work that Matt Ross does there with our outdoor recreation. And then finally, the great work, and this was a partnership with our school system and the community and a lot of the partners and contractors and so forth, the renovation of Lark Field. Yes. And some of my best memories really are with my two sons. They were at Lark Field when they were growing up. Playing baseball, and so if you haven't been to Lark Field, it's baseball time, and Jamey was telling me the great weather ahead, so look forward to a great season. And certainly, finally, public safety, cannot say enough great things, again, about our first responders. Our Sheriff's Department's accredited. They launched an emergency medical dispatch in our 911 center this year that's been able to assist public safety in better triaging calls. And getting to the more immediate call first, and then providing emergency medical assistance to those that maybe could wait. And so these are all good things that we want to talk about. So I know I've talked a lot about the pressures and the challenges, but there's so much good in Franklin County, Kevin, going on this morning.
Absolutely.
And so we're very appreciative of that, and sometimes we lose sight of that and need to keep, in the scheme of things, we just need to keep our eye on the prize and work harder towards these things. Big pause there. So what does all this mean for the citizens? Now, folks say, well, wow, didn't he just have said all of that? And, I could have got my coffee and didn't have to have 2 cups of coffee this morning before I can get to the punchline. So what about next year? What about the budget? And the presentation to the board yesterday, following the various budget work sessions, and we started those earlier this year. We've had 4. And discussion with the Board of Supervisors and staff and reviewing all the budget, we've prepared a balanced budget with no tax increases this year. It's very much a maintenance budget. It's fairly level funded. It does fund expenditure pressures like CSA, but it continues to support those priorities that I mentioned earlier, those strategic community priorities that the board has set. Overall, this budget is about $143 million. It's an increase of 1.34% from last year. So again, very much a level maintenance budget. On the general government side, no new positions are being recommended for funding, no new programs. The county staff, we have cut $5.9 million from the operational funding requests that had been requested. We cut another $2.8 million out of the capital funding that had been requested. And then we went back to our existing budgets, because this budget could not be balanced with the challenges of CSA and that small amount of discretionary revenue without really cutting our existing budget in areas. So we spent a lot of time going through line items where we cut out an additional $400,000 to really help balance next year's budget. And so we anticipate the CSA expenditures, again, to increase to $6.5 million next year. That's a little bit above where it was this year, but this year's budget's only $5.3 million. And so we knew we needed to set aside and plan for that. So we had to increase that area about $1.1 million for CSA. So what we've recommended of that 1.1, again with the local match, that's about $381,000, if you will. We're recommending that be put in a CSA budgetary reserve if we need it. And that's primarily due to the increasing cost of those private day special education student placements. We're suggesting that the county and schools split that cost 50-50, or about $190,000 each. That's not to say splitting the entire cost, but really trying to split the cost of the projected increase at this time as an incentive, if you will, for this collaborative approach, working with the school system and the CPMT to really get our hands around those costs. And if those costs are contained and the CSA reserve is not needed, Kevin, certainly we would allocate those monies back to other county needs and school needs equally. And so that's the recommendation. What does that look like? Again, that's new local discretionary revenue that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. That was $2.5 to $4 million a year. It's down now to $1 million the last several years. Doing a traditional split with the schools, a historical split, it's an additional $559,000 to the schools, an additional $516,000 the county government, and then you set aside those reserves, and that's the additional amount that's being recommended this year in the budget. So looking at the proposed school budget recommendation, again, it's an increase of $559,000, $307 above last year. Setting aside that $190,000, hopefully not needed, and allocated back, and again, the county would set aside that equal amount. An additional oil capital funding for the schools of $1.2 million, and then certainly ongoing debt of $1.6 million. And so in total, that's about $87.3 million, both state, federal, and local dollars next year for the school system. And then looking at the county budget, again, increase in certain areas. Capital budget, level funding, again, that $2.2 million that goes towards our capital that I mentioned hasn't been increased really since the 2000s. And then we are recommending a cost of living increase, or a cost of living adjustment rather, of 2% for county employees. Certainly we would always like to do more, but this budget was very challenging. And if the CSA expenditures do not require additional county funds, perhaps we can look at another cost of living adjustment mid-year, maybe 0.5% to 1%. I'm cautiously optimistic about that. And so looking at the expenditures for the viewers, you can see the overall county budget, schools around 61%. That 61%, again, I think previous years may have been 62 with the drop of student enrollment. Those state dollars are less, and so that's why that's probably dropped 1%. Judicial 2%, sheriff and public safety 11%, parks and rec portion of the county budget's about 2%, health and welfare about 10%, public works 3%. And then 7% capital outlay, and then community development at about 4%. Because that just kind of gives a perspective of where are the dollars going. And then the revenues, I won't go into those specific, but the county, of course, receives the majority of revenue from the state and feds. And then the portion on the county funds, real estate, personal property, and so forth. And I know I've went through a lot of this information this morning, Kevin, but for the viewers and for you, all of this information, including the detail of line items and so forth, we want to be as transparent as we can. That is posted on the county's website, franklincountyva.gov. There are copies. If you're not web savvy, it's okay. We will have copies placed at the county libraries, as well as the county administration, our office there at the County Government Center, and the finance office. And so probably next questions are where do we go from here? But,
absolutely.
And so where do we go from here? Of course, this was a lot of information for the board to digest yesterday. And so the board is going to take the budget information, have some time over the next week or so, and look that over. And then on April 2nd, at 9 o'clock, the board will hold a budget work session. To bring any other questions that they may have. They can hold additional work sessions as needed. Tentatively, if of course it's the desire of the board, if they're ready to send the budget to public hearing, tentatively, if they send it to public hearing on April 2nd, we would look possibly at a tentative budget public hearing. I've talked a lot this morning.
That's right.
Budget public hearing at 6 o'clock on April 16th at the Government Center, and then certainly the possible adoption of the budget a week later. But again, those are tentative dates, Kevin. I would not want to say that they are specific because they have not necessarily been advertised yet, and that will be done when the board is ready to do so. So a lot of information this morning. I hope it's been helpful for you and the viewer, and certainly if citizens or anyone has any questions, they certainly could contact our office at the county or the county finance office, and we'll be glad to sit down and go over that information. So a lot of challenges for Franklin County, sure. But Franklin County's best days are ahead, not behind us, they're ahead certainly, and we always have to keep our eyes on that and again, work smarter, more efficiently, all while serving the needs. You cannot find a better community than this.
Absolutely.
And we're in far better shape than many localities, and sometimes it's easy to look at the challenges but not be reminded that there are far more communities more challenged than us this morning, and so we're very blessed in many ways.
Absolutely, and now it's up to you as citizens of Franklin County to get involved in this process. You saw the budget that's being proposed. Whenever the public hearing is, tentatively scheduled for April 16th.
We'll have that advertised.
Get out and be a part of that. But even before that, if you have comments for your board of supervisor member or for Chris, send them an email, give them a call, let them know, what your concerns are. If you have questions, he's more than capable of answering those questions that we've had. Go back and watch our show from this morning. Different parts of it. We're going to have the entire thing. It's live streaming on Facebook. We're also going to cut it up and have it on YouTube for you to share it around to all of your family and friends, just so they can get and hear this information firsthand. But again, just be a participant in your budget. This is your budget as much as it is the county's budget. So just get involved in that and let them know your concerns, let them know your questions. If you think they're doing a great job, by all means, let them know that too, because again, it takes all of us here in the county. It's everything affects us. So we appreciate you coming out and presenting this to us. We know that folks need to have as many opportunities as they can to hear it. And as you said, county website, we're also going to have a link to it on our website, cable12ynn.com, for you to get to it. Available at the library. So lots of opportunities for you to get your hands on one of the presentations and on the budget to take a look at for yourself. But as we said, just thank you very much for all the hard work. We were talking in one of the breaks, I asked Chris, how long have you been working on this? And he said since October, but it's probably been a little further back than that. But a lot of work goes into that, a lot of number crunching. I also thank all of the departments for inputting their budgets, the public safety, the school. Equal amount of time goes into preparation of those proposals. But it was a lot of information we threw at you this morning. So give yourself a little bit of time to digest it. Go back, watch the rebroadcast, whether it be on Facebook, YouTube, or on your neighborhood network, Cable 12. And again, if you have any questions, concerns, comments, send it out to your Board of Supervisor members, send it out to Chris, and they will reach back out to you with those answers. Well, I think we're going to let you go. We're going to give you a chance to actually fill up that coffee mug here on this Wednesday morning.
That's great.
And again, we appreciate your time and effort and the Board of Supervisors for putting this together for us.
Thank you, Kevin. And thank you and Jamey and Cable 12 and the staff here at Cable 12, because what you do is very important to our community, getting information out to the citizens, and we thank you.